will support it. That's what she said. Well, she's ex-military, so she has strict, you know, she believes in
Their
strict.
chain of,
Yeah, chain of command.
515.
I have 1 minute.
Yep, 1 minute away.
So we're all here.
Probably.
Mr. Sanders will present. Item 6 on reports and information items. Item A, Board of Trustees. Discussion on charge for the redistricting committee is 1. We'll have an update, number 2, by the redistricting committee on single-member redistricting plans. Number 3, a report on trustee continuing education hours from April 22nd to present as required by board policy and TASB. Item 4, we'll have a board legal expenses update in the packet. Item 5.
And I'd intended for it to be a discussion that we had tonight. I don't think it's something that will require a vote, and so I wanted to save time on our longer meeting and just have that discussion tonight. Is it possible to move that to this?
So we'll take that one off from the agenda, and maybe at the end, or did you want to make a comment about why you wanted to discuss it right now?
Sure. I just wanted to propose a recurring communication coming from the board to all of our staff as a means of encouraging openness and transparency and communication with our staff. I've seen some models of other districts that do this, where videos are prepared by the board after each regular board meeting to just give a quick update about what we voted on and what we did in our meeting. And I think it would be valuable for us to exemplify the kind of openness and, you know, direct communication that we want to see to implement the kind of change in the organization that we've been asking for. So I just wanted us to lead by example in that way. So I don't know that it requires a vote. It's just something that I'd like to see us start doing. It would require some effort from Mr. Fernandez's group, and some, you know, but it seems eminently doable, and it could be a fairly easy and straightforward thing to do.
So you're proposing that at the end of the meeting, each person say something?
No, well, we can do it any number of ways. What I've seen from a large district in San Antonio is that they rotate through each of the board members, making a video where they notify the staff and to community at large about what happened in that board meeting. And it's just an informational presentation, very short, agreed upon, kind of, you know, words. You know, what we say would be agreed upon. Yeah, a summary of what happened, and then just rotate through the board members to make a little video that goes out to all of our staff.
What do y'all think of that?
I don't like videos.
like this idea, though, in theory. It's a great idea, and it's way overdue.
I think the value of a video is that people don't read long emails, and a 2-minute video is super easy to watch on your phone when you're in a lunchroom, right, on your 30-minute lunch break as a teacher. That's why I would propose a video. It's just a little more engaging.
So are you proposing that this video be recorded after each meeting?
Yeah, not immediately, like not that night.
It could be the next morning.
Sure, or that week. I mean, it could be, you know, sent out on Friday of the week of the meeting. It's just intended as a method for us to increase transparency and communication as a board and to exemplify that thing that we've asked our superintendent to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great idea. I think that it's come up before in some form, but I think it's, the only drawback is it really takes that commitment and that effort to make sure and added staff work, but to get it out every time, right? Because I think that it's a great idea. It's just really in the implementation, because it's the sort of thing that if you aren't consistent with, then it looks badly.
You don't want to do one 1 month and not do one the next month, and then
Right.
yeah.
Right.
You do it or we don't. Okay.
And the culture change that we've been asking for, I think that that kind of consistency is part of that culture change that we'd like to see. So I'd like to see us be that kind of culture change as well.
I like the idea, but I think that, first of all, I'd like the president to be in charge of delivering the message after whatever we discuss in the meeting. Because I think that it's better if people get used to seeing the president as the spokeswoman for the woman or man, whatever is the president, as the spokesperson for the board, because that's the way it should be. I think. That's my opinion.
I guess I would say just, Trustee Villalpando, I think that there's value in our staff knowing all of the board, because we all represent them in some way or another, some of us at large, some of us individual districts, but I think that there is also value in our staff knowing that they can talk to us. They can talk to us about all of their issues. And so I think that's one of the things that is valuable, and I think it could go beyond just staff, right? I would imagine that this could go out on our website to all of our families as well. I think that those kinds of things would be super useful.
Yeah. But I still think that there should be whatever we have at a board meeting, that the president should be the one disseminating that message to everybody. I don't know. That's just my opinion. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and that's not going to be a deal breaker for me. I think it's really important that we as a board speak to our community and our staff. And so if it
we all
needs to be,
speak to the community, then we all need to be saying the same message. But I still think it's the president's responsibility to convey that message.
Ms. Cantu?
That's just my opinion.
I think that one other consideration that we should be thinking about is if we are going to designate a different person every month to do it and rotate it that way, which I think is a really good idea, actually, that we should maybe think about how the process that we're going to use to implement for agreeing on the script, because I think that that's important if we are rotating through, that we are agreeing that, you know, tonight I speak for all of you, tomorrow you speak for all of us, tomorrow you speak for all of us. I certainly would want to make sure that I was in agreement with what everybody was saying, because otherwise it seems like it could be sort of the opposite of what it intended, right? And could become very divisive and could become problematic when it was intended to be informative and helpful. So I would think we would need to discuss how exactly that would work and the time frame and
yeah, and I think my intent was that it would largely be focused on those actions that we pass, right? So it would mostly be around those things that we pass, and it would be a statement of, we would stick to the agenda, that this is what the board voted on. The board got a presentation of these things, and the board voted on these things. And that was my intent. So it would not be, I think that there are ways to keep it very factual.
have to agree with Ms. Halsey that it just all depends on our staff schedule with Mr. Fernandez's team. So we definitely don't want to overwork them as well. So, and also, you know, I don't speak for everyone here on the board, but I know that some of us do have jobs, and so this is something that we would have to plan in advance to take time off or earn overtime. So,
Anyone else?
Is this something that we would, was I correct? Is this something that we would need to vote on, or how would we implement this change? Or do we just talk about it tonight and never do anything? Sorry.
I think we need to let Dr. Cardona speak to his staff and see if they have the resources available and what kind of
That's a good
resources
idea.
those would be required, and then he can come back maybe at our regular school board meeting and let us know what the impact would be and if it's doable, and then we can maybe discuss all the details about who's on first and all that.
Sounds good. Maybe we will leave it on the agenda then.
Also, I have heard of this being done. I haven't actually seen any communications from other school boards that have done it in any, like, whether I know some people send out emails, I know a variety of things. But if you have examples of other districts and the way that they've done it, that would be helpful to see.
I would like to see that too.
Board, and
happy
that
to.
way,
Happy to.
everybody would have an example of what we're doing.
Not when we're having this discussion.
I would
so.
be happy to.
Okay?
It's a good one,
So
too.
are we leaving it on?
Yes.
Well, it needs to be somewhere that we can, I guess, make action happen. Does this?
So then it would move down to items for action?
Sure. I mean, if it requires action, that's maybe still an outstanding question that I don't seem to understand how we implement changes in what we do as a board if they must be voted on.
I mean, I don't think it requires action per se. I think it just requires the board directing staff. But I think that we can't direct staff to start it next week necessarily, because I think we need to figure out the process. So I think the point the reasonable thing at this point to me would be to direct staff to put together any examples that they can. If board members have examples that they can send to staff, that staff can then send out to the rest of the board, and
So
then.
maybe move it to May so that we have time?
Well, I mean, I think we should be able to have consensus by the next agenda prep meeting if we haven't.
April?
Or
Do we
or
wanna
we
leave
could
it
have
for
a.
April?
Couldn't we have consensus offline even? It's not really
Yeah, there's
We-
no vote.
right.
So then we're leaving it on
Great. Thank you.
for the April meeting.
Thank you.
You can move on to approval of consent.
All right. Item 7, approval of consent agenda items. 7A, approval of the minutes for the regular scheduled board meeting on March 6, 2023, and the special board meeting on April 3rd, 2023. Item 7B, consider resolution extending depository contract. Our current depository is Frost Bank, so we have to do these every 2 or 3 years, so and we're just bringing that to y'all to approve.
That's just the bank you use to do business.
Yes, one of, we use several, but that's one. Item 8, items for action. 8A, operations, discussion, and possible action allowing for the implementation of the school marshal program. And we will have Chief Stanridge, Mr. Wozniak, and Mr. Cruz, somebody from his office will be here on that day to answer any legal questions.
Can I have a question? Good. We have Mr. Wozniak prepare a presentation for the board in advance of the discussion and the vote. I think that, the board has received a particular presentation, but I really think that we need to, one, make a public presentation so that the public knows what we are considering and what we aren't considering, and sort of the, outlines of how it would work and the safety reasons and also the safety measures that we're taking or considering taking with the implementation. I also would really like it if staff if administration would go to staff and have, whether that's a survey or it's up to y'all, but to get some input from staff, to brief staff on what we're doing, to get, to answer any questions that they might have in advance, tell them what we're considering, give them an opportunity to weigh in with questions, with whatever, particularly our elementary school staff, but also I think that it's important to involve our staff at the secondary level.
Have we sent anything out? To all staff, that this was being looked at, so that they can
Yes.
understand that we're not arming ourselves?
Yes, 100%, yes.
There was a comment about that.
Could we do maybe, did it include one of those, the thought bubble, thought exchange? I know
Exchange.
one of those just went out to some parent group that I'm on, we just got one. But if we could do something like that, or open up an avenue for staff to convey if they don't feel comfortable calling you directly, but can convey their concerns, because I want to make sure that whatever we do, that we're really mindful of that. Thanks.
So item 8A2, discussion and approval of the job order contractor. The job order contractor name is just a placeholder, so when we bring it to you, we will have a specific company for the high school band practice lot expansion. Item 8, number 3, discussion and approval of the job order contract for the high school band practice lot expansion. Under B, finance, discussion and possible action to approve the agreement for the purchase of attendance credit. So we have to put this on. You have to sign this contract within 45 days of the election.
So are we out 45 days or?
We're within that time frame. Yes.
Thank you for explaining that. You saw my face.
Item 8B, number 2, consider approval of budget amendments. Item 9, closed session as authorized by section 551.074 of the Texas Education Code. Item 9A, discuss administrator contract renewals and extension. Item 9B, discuss teacher and other professional personnel contract renewals. Item 9C, discussion regarding the superintendent contract. Item 10, open session.
Sorry, I have a question about that. I don't think that we've seen yet the spreadsheet with stipends, have we?
Usually we get a handout that tells us that the stipends are changing.
I would just like us to review the stipends in general. I think that we've had, a lot of changes staffing-wise across the district, and then we've had the effects of staffing on COVID, or the COVID effects on staffing, which have created some shifts. So I think it would be great if we looked at that holistically. And so I think, I don't know if we need to do that in closed session or how we do it, but I would like to undertake that review again.
We just have to reword discussion, because this is only relating to the contracts.
So in the budget
So
material.
we'll have to change the wording of closed session, but we'll get with one.
So in the budget material, do we have stipends included in here? No? Okay.
Item 10, open session. The board will reconvene from closed session to take action on items discussed in closed session. 10A, consideration and possible approval of administrator contract renewals and extensions. 10B, consideration and possible approval of teacher and other professional personnel contract renewals. And then item C, consider action regarding superintendent's contract. And Madam President, that's it for administration.
Changes, additions, comments? So we're good with the agenda, so we can move into our budget workshop, please?
All right, good evening, board. I left everybody on the table or in your area a copy of the presentation that we'll review tonight. So our agenda is to review that revenue projection as of March 23, and also do a review of salary scenarios and open it up for feedback in terms of some directives and how we might want to guide those salary scenarios moving forward. Wanted to include, like last time, DEA local policy in terms of setting up that compensation plan and how it comes about. The superintendent makes that proposal, and then the board will determine those compensation plans that are packaged. So currently, you look at this graphic, the two charts, or look at the one chart, the graphic on the left, if you will, 22-23 projection, how we close out the year. We're looking at somewhere between 79 and 81 million in revenue income. Looking at an early projection for 23-24 school year, you can see we do see an increase projecting 84 to 86 million. Now that's as of March 23. The big reason why you see that increase is due to the fact that the yield that's earned on golden pennies has increased by the state. And if you look at legislation, that yield will continue to go for the next few years, but that's why you'll see that rise in revenue projection for next year. We have two plans for you tonight. Calling zero base, or scenario one is our zero base plan. That's as if all the teachers, all staff were to come back next year, no pay increase, what have you. You can see no changes across the board. Salary, our estimation right now would be 72.8 million, or a little bit above. We're looking at a maintenance operation cost, meaning keeping the lights on the building, what have you, would be a little over 16.7 million for a total budget of $89.5 million. So what's that impact look like? You can see on the next page, if we're assuming that our revenue projection is coming in at 85.6, if that stays true, that would create a budget deficit of 3.8 million. When you add in the 6.7 that's already allocated for your central office, you'll see that net change in fund balance of 10.5 million. When you look at the end fund balance, or proposed, if you will, the impact on your fund balance, right, you would see that it would, our fund balance would be at a little over $39 million. We did calculate our 3-month operation at 23.9, leaving us a total unassigned fund balance of just over $15 million. When you look at scenario 2, again, scenario 2, you can see the factors and then the changes. This is based on recommendations in our previous budget workshop. You can see that teachers are receiving in this scenario proposal, right, of 17.5 a stipend, 2% administration, $1 classified. You can see that impacts their salary cost, brings it up to a little over 75 million. Again, that maintenance operation is 16.7. Again, we're keeping in mind, adjusting for inflation, we're still working that number as well, getting all of our department estimates and things in, as well as we're building the budget. But for the numbers we have right now, we're using that 16.7 for a total budget of $91.8 million. So very similar to the methodology of scenario 1. What is scenario 2? It's zero plan impact. That's scenario 2 impact. I'm sorry for that mistake. Working off that again, that $85.6 million revenue projection, you can see that does increase that budget deficit up to $6.1 million. Again, central office allocated at 6.7. That net change of fund balance, the impact of our fund balance, if you will, would be 12.8 million. Again, the end fund balance proposed would be that 36.7. We do have our 3 months operation factored in at 23.9 for a total unassigned fund balance of 12.7. Those are the two scenarios that we have for this evening. We are looking, like I said, for feedback in terms of how we're working the budget, and as we plan to bring forth numbers for you in May, is when we learn more in terms of our needs. The other catalyst is think about is legislation. There's still many variables that the state is still trying to decide upon. That's still in play as well. Our goal is by May we can have another budget workshop, really bring back some solid numbers. We'll have almost a full year of data in terms of ADA and how that impacts that next year's revenue projection. And I feel like we are definitely on target by June to be able to bring you a budget, a proposed budget to adopt.
Ready for questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Doyle,
Yes, ma'am.
So I am looking at scenario number 2. On the stipend for the teachers, could you please tell me when would that stipend be paid out to them?
It's not necessarily planned. I would imagine at the first of the year, but that's not in details right now. We're just
In the
we're
past,
just basing
how
a
would we,
budget number.
what have we done in the past? The retention, yeah. In October, okay. Okay,
You suggest what?
beginning. So would that be around August, September? Okay, thank you.
Oh, Brian?
I had a question. So the 3-month operating budget is the same for both plans?
Yes.
So the operating budget doesn't include salaries
It
or the stipend?
It does, but we keep that consistent just based on the fact that we don't really have a solid staff number based on these two scenarios.
Okay.
It's going to stay around that 23 million-ish figure.
2%.
Mhm. It would go up.
Okay.
Right.
It's just because I think it's important to understand the unassigned fund balance we have remaining. Okay, thank you.
But the three-month operating is dictated by the state. That's what we're supposed to have,
Right. The state asks.
required to have.
Ms. Cantu, thank you. So can y'all please explain the impact of a stipend as opposed to a salary adjustment on teachers regarding their retirement and other things? Okay. Okay. So it wouldn't be, okay, so explain that a little more. Okay. 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 And so, forgive me, I think I missed the first budget workshop where it was proposed apparently that we would do stipend as opposed to pay increase. Is there any benefit to the teachers to having a stipend as opposed to a pay increase?
I guess in terms of benefit for the teacher would be receiving compensation. The other idea behind it is there's a lot of talk of the increase of basic allotment, which if that does come through, that a certain percentage of that new income has to go toward teacher payment. And so anything done before that wouldn't go toward that increase in
You mean in the
teacher payment.
legislative session that's going on right now?
Correct.
Would those changes that are decided during this legislative session, when would they take effect, typically?
At the end of May, if they don't extend, if they don't have a special called session afterwards. But it'd be end of May, 1st of June.
But if the Texas legislature does not increase the allotment, then this would be the increase that we're talking about for all teachers.
Correct. Now, keep in mind too, we could always make a determination to come back and say August or September with that adjustment as well, depending on what legislation the Texas legislation decides and votes through. So that way we can, if we wanted to make that increase, then we could.
And has the board, so the only other stipend we've done across the board was for retirement. Have we ever used this
Retention.
method before?
Yes, the retention payments.
That's the only other way. Okay. I had one more question, if I may. Do you know, and this one is on the spot, so if you don't have the answer, I understand, if you have an average or a ballpark of our budget amendments as a board for the past 3 to 5 years? I know that we have a budget that we prepare. I've also witnessed amendments that exceed that budget by a good bit. So is that something that you guys have available or could share with us by email after the meeting?
Yeah, we can.
Thank you. It's kind of on the spot, so.
Budget.
Budget amendment totals for the past, let's say, 5 years, if you've got to look something up, just to see how off we've been as a board. Thank you.
Usually the Budget amendments are movement within the budget, the approved budget, that move from one category to another category.
So I specifically mean increases
Increases,
the
not just
amount
function changes.
that we are adding in a budgeted item. Yes, that's what I
But
specifically
we
mean.
have to go to the savings for,
Mm-hmm,
to move into the budget, that's what
Correct.
you're asking.
Okay.
that's what I'm
Like our
asking.
water, our boiler.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to clarify.
No, yeah, that's.
Can I add on to that then, though? If we're going to do that, we should also show on those same 5 years how much we've added back in at the end. Because sometimes we pull things out because it's necessary during the year to cover a cost, and then we add something back in at the end. So I don't want it to end up looking like we've just been draining.
No, yeah, I meant as an annual summary, not month by month. I don't need that.
No, but I also don't want it. I think we need to show both sides of that. That yes, we make changes during to the budget, but that we don't just deplete the savings, because that hasn't been happening. We have actually been returning money to the savings.
Okay.
Anyone else?
I have some questions.
Oh, Ms. Halsey?
Can we go then to the 2% with the administrators? And I just want to, I think I'm going to say back what I'm, as part of what Marion asked, but we're considering the percentage with administration rather than a stipend because we don't expect that the basic allotment will change in a way that significantly impacts administrators, right? So that's something that we would not plan to revisit during the year. If we did a 2% now, we would leave it like that for the duration of the year.
Correct. Yeah.
Whereas we had talked about doing a stipend at the beginning of the year for teachers, and then potentially if the state comes in, because we didn't expect that they would have it but by the time that we needed to make our decision. So we would come back later and make a change if the state allowed that. But last time we did this, when we gave a pay increase to teachers ahead of the state, then we didn't get the credit for it that we deserved from the state. So that's why we're sort of holding off on that, and because they don't. Oddly enough, even though we did the right thing by our staff and increased their pay salaries, the state didn't acknowledge that in their calculations. So we don't.
To that, we're not the only school district who's making that consideration.
Right, which would be great if we could afford to do double, right? But I'm not sure that we're in a situation where we can do that this year. So could you explain then the 2% and what that looks like for administration? Like, does that mean a 2% on the midpoint? Or does that mean a dollar amount that's the average of somebody's salary that everybody gets, or what does that look like, please?
Be on the midpoint adjustment on the.
So can you explain that in, like, what does it mean?
I'd yield to HR.
Based on each of the pay grades, what the midpoint is to that would be, and that's out what we added to each of those individual salaries. So for example, several positions within pay grade, and so the midpoint adjustment would be that would be increase our, so wouldn't necessarily be 2% for everybody across the board in terms of you get your salary times 2%. It's whatever that midpoint adjustment is. Similar what we did with teachers, it was the midpoint. So it ended up being $73 for every person that is
So if Mary and I are both elementary school principals, then you would go to the midpoint of our pay grade and determine 2% of that, and then both of us would get that same dollar value. And if Mr. Cardona and Ms. Cantu were both superintendents, then they would go to the middle of their pay grade. So ostensibly, theirs would be higher than, right? Am I following correctly? Right. I mean, if they're superintendents and we're, okay, thanks. Just wanted to make sure we're all clear on that. And so then my next question is the golden penny timeline for when the yield increases. When does that start?
The increases will affect us for next year's revenue.
But will it affect this year's revenue?
No, unfortunately not.
It won't go into effect until the next financial year.
Correct.
Okay.
When we start collecting revenue for next year.
And is that determined on action that has yet to happen at the Capitol, or what is that finalized?
That's been finalized, yes.
Okay. But we don't know the exact.
I do know the dollar figure. I got to look it up. It's.
'Cause there was a range that you were projecting that it would increase, so that the rest of the range is because of the basic allotment, room for that?
No, this is outside of basic allotment adjustment. This is something that was in a different statute. I can look it up before we leave, and I can give you that figure of what that golden penny yield is.
No, you on your 2023 updated early projection, you had 84 to 86 million, and so I'm asking if that range that is there is because you expect a further increase from the basic allotment or the golden penny increase falls within there.
That's just the golden penny yield. I haven't calculated anything on the basic allotment because I'm hearing all sorts of things from $200 to $500 for cents. It's, when you look at all different legislation bills that have been proposed, there's a gamut, and so I don't want to put a projection
That's
out
fine.
based on assumptions.
Yeah, that's fair. If we expect it to be actually 86, I would like us to just make sure that we're working from 86. So I'd like to be as close as possible on that number. If that yield
Right,
percentage has
true,
been determined.
but then the other variables of our ADA and our WADA and those other variables are also affecting. I say 86 because it's looking more like that 85 point something. So
you're being conservative.
I'm being as I wouldn't say yes.
It's fair. I just want us to understand what we're. Yeah.
I am yielding on the conservative
Okay.
side because I want to make sure that
That's fair. I just want to make
we're
sure.
staying
Okay.
true. But with that being said, I am, like I said, I'm using the numbers and the data that we have, and when I plug it in our revenue template, that 85 figure that we have further in the presentation is what I'm seeing.
You feel like that's the closest, conservatively, that's the closest that we can guarantee getting.
Right now,
Okay.
yes.
That's cool. Then my last question, I think, is when we do this going forward, I really think it's important that we start to line item identify the amount of money we're spending a year on recapture. Because I don't know where that figures in here, and I think it's important that we see that.
So that's a good question. It's already calculated in. So I have a revenue template. I take that data, put it into the template that I deduct out what that revenue template's projection on recapture is. So when you see that 84 to 85 million figure, that's already recapture pulled out.
So I'm fine with starting, I mean, it's up to my colleagues also, but I'm fine having, the starting line still be 85 and that we just keep another column running that shows recapture so that we all know that it's not coming, it is coming out of the fund balance, but we're not, however you want to show that in your accounting is fine with me, and unless other people have a specific way, but I just want us to be able to see that
Absolutely.
visual reminder. Thank you.
Ms. Cantu? Since I wasn't here apparently for the first budget workshop, I'm going to also ask that we have a scenario 3 that is a 2% across the board raise.
2%?
2% for teachers, administrators, and classified.
I have a question. When you hear the legislators talk about giving the teachers a boost, they're only talking about teachers. They're not talking about administration. They're not talking about hourly. It's just
Teachers, counselors, it's very specific depending on the bill that you're looking at, but it's been teachers, counselors, and instructional staff.
that's what I thought it was. That way we have to look out for hourly. Anyone else have a question? Good presentation. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
That's what I'd like to see, yes.
I don't think we could go much higher than that.
Did y'all want us to look at, potentially looking at incentivizing? We talked about a type of performance for like reading teachers and math teachers.
I think that it's important for us to know what the stipends are, kind of along with that conversation, because it's, I guess, my understanding of
We'll
this.
get you that information, but do you want us to explore what it would look like, I guess?
In addition
If-
to the stipend
Yes.
situation.
So third grade teacher gets X number, it meets her master's, then on top of that, we potentially could incentivize that.
No, I'm not interested in looking at that.
I like that idea. I do, yes. Very much so.
What about you?
My thing is that it just depends on how many years they've been here. Wouldn't that kind of just fall into?
Not necessarily, there's
not-
different performance models that we'll look at, reading and math or any tested area potentially, whether we have the capability of getting the data needed to make those projections. But we're not talking base salary.
You're
We're
talking
talking
about,
incentivizing
An
on top of that.
incentive.
that didn't go well in Atlanta when they did it.
Okay.
Well,
Historically.
it doesn't typically go
so-
well in a lot of places.
Yeah.
but It is a method.
Yeah, it's not something that I'm particularly interested in, no.
I'm not interested in that, but I am interested in further incentivizing hard-to-fill positions, and if they are, especially if they are in tested subject areas where we are behind. So I would be certainly open to having that conversation. I don't know if this is a scenario exactly, but I think one thing I'm really interested in considering and communicating out to teachers is that if we didn't take action on this before, because I feel like we're sort of in a pickle, right? Because we don't know what the state's going to do, and so it makes it very difficult. Because I think really the state, as we've seen, has a total disregard for what we do as an individual school board. They don't look at us. They didn't give us an exemption last time, and we don't now, with the state demands on recapture and fund balance, have a lot of wiggle room with that. So. I think there's one scenario where we could pass the teacher stipend now, and then, if we got the increase from the state, come back in September and do a 2% increase, or whatever the state if the state mandates higher than that, then we would do higher than that. But that would still then probably give us a significant budget gap, because the state is unlikely to pay for probably even all of the funds to cover whatever mandate they require for the increase, and they certainly won't pay for it for more than 1 year, right? So we should, if we can, if we have any ability to sort of look forward and see what that budget gap would look like by us doing that, right? Because I'm fine with turning that incentive into a bonus kind of incentive, right? I think our staff certainly is deserving of that, but I just worry about if we do the 2% and then the state says you have to do 3.5%, and our 2% already didn't count, so then we're just deeper in the hole. But I don't want to signal to the staff that we're not interested in doing anything, because I think we are all willing to do whatever we can. I think we haven't figured out what that is, but I think everybody wants to help increase the pay for teachers especially. But so I'm not sure what, I worry about going into approving a budget that doesn't have that increase in there in any way. Although I think that we would make good on that, but
Puts us in a difficult situation.
it's a really, yeah.
Very difficult situation when you're working with unknown, and the big unknown is what the legislators are going to require. Now, when they say they're going to give this extra amount, they're sending money to go with it, right?
Well, it'd be that increase in the basic allotment. So what the statute says, if whatever that basic allotment increase is, whatever increase that a district
So they would
gets,
put
you
it in
have
with
to
that.
use 50% of that increase on staff pay increases. So there is a way. There's one of the revenue templates that just came out. There's a way to play some hypotheticals in there, and I think there's a way to kind of look and see what that hypothetical would look like if there's maybe $50, $100, $200 increase on the basic allotment.
I think that would be helpful. It would help me.
Did anyone else? Did you?
I would like to go back to what Dr. Cardona stated. Academics is our priority, and our academics continue to fall short, and we continue to give pay raises across the board, and there's no incentive for the teachers that are doing really well to continue to put in the extra work necessary for their students to do really well when they're getting the same pay raises that teachers who aren't putting in the same amount of work. And at some point, if we want things to change, we've got to try different things. And I know for the last probably 5 years, every time there's been a pay raise for teachers, it's been across the board. Same way with administrators. So if the school is doing well, then the principal, maybe we give that principal of that school a bonus if they've improved over the last 2 years. So we got to look at ways to incentivize our teachers to continue to work hard. Otherwise, our good teachers are going to leave. And we all know we have good teachers, and then we have some mediocre teachers, and they're getting paid the same, they're getting the same salary adjustment. So I think we really need to, instead of just writing it off, we need to take a hard look and see how we can make sure we keep our good teachers and we incentivize that. So just wanted to state that.
What you were talking about was Hutchinson's and working on higher degrees, right?
No,
No?
I'm talking about teachers who, your AP physics teacher, not that we have any, but your AP physics teacher who's at 60% of her kids scoring 3 or higher should be rewarded because they're at the world average
Okay.
as compared to this, a teacher that,
Okay, because I just heard you say something about working on a master's degree.
I said performance pay, performance, yeah.
The
Go ahead.
the issue I have is that it discounts the holistic view of education and cooperation across all the disciplines. The choir director wouldn't be eligible for that sort of a model, but their impact on the student performance might be what got that student to that grade. So I think that's the concern I have with any kind of specific to testing compensation models. And
Choir directors do have state UIL, so you could look at if they
True.
get superior ratings, they
That's
could be
true.
incentivized.
That's
That
true.
is their STAR test.
that's true.
Career technology teachers getting certifications for kids, that is their STAR test.
That's true.
So, I mean, if we have a cosmetology program that produces 50 kids a year, but only 2 are earning their certification, I think we need to look at that and see how do we support the teacher, and vice versa. We have a CNA teacher who is producing nurses at a really high rate. We should look at rewarding them for those certification tests on top of their salary. Because,
So something more holistic than just STAR.
correct, yes.
Yes, and there would definitely be
I was just
administrator, the
mentioning-
principal would have input. Yeah, if we keep doing the same thing over and over and expect different results, we're not going to get anywhere. And I think we do need to really incentivize. We've got some really awesome teachers. And they should be rewarded for being awesome teachers, because our kids are all getting the benefit of that.
I mean, my premise was saying reading and math, that's the easiest thing to track, but, I mean, you could look at choir historically, and they
Well, and
produce the
we're-
most number of all state kids.
We're using a test that we're paying for as a district that tracks student performance in a way that some would consider is better than the STAR test, so perhaps the MAPS.
And I'm even
assessment
okay
would
with
be
using that, if that's the administration's recommendation, is using that as an evaluation. As long as we're rewarding teachers who are improving our students and, getting them excited about learning and captivated, that's what we want to reward, and that's what we want to attract.
But it would begin with a discussion with the teachers first.
Yeah, I just wondered, Mr. Shanks, if you had ideas on criteria, on budget for that, on, whether the scope would include all teachers pre-K through high school, or if we would just focus on secondary. I was wondering how you thought, how you thought that could work best.
I think that would work best by the superintendent getting with his staff and coming up with a plan and bringing it to us for approval. I'm not even going to remotely pretend to get that deep into the weeds of the administration. We hire professionals and we pay them professional wages. I think if there's interest in that, then they should be able to come up with a workable plan.
But would you suggest that we use the entire budget that we're talking about now for increases toward that purpose, or would you think of doing it a portion? I mean, we'd have to give some direction to the staff.
My idea would be to give them a pot of money, a certain amount based on recommendations from Dr. Cordona, saying, hey, we're estimating that we have this many that we would want to reward, so this is the budget I would request for these merit increases.
Because, I mean, I think that we all know that all of our employees' expenses, household living expenses, are increasing, right, exponentially, as everybody's are. And we are already looking at running a deficit even if we don't do any incentive, any increases or incentives or stipends. So I'm just not sure how we can, how to do that in a manner that would accomplish what it is that we, I think, would all like to accomplish, but in a way that would do that meaningfully and purposefully without then creating a whole new set of problems. Because I think that, you know, a $50 incentive isn't going to accomplish what we're talking about, right? I think that what schools that are doing models like this are doing is they are really increasing, like they're giving teachers 6 figures, right? A teacher that is doing these, that is showing on these levels that they are going to do it, they're increasing their pay rate over 6 figures, and we are far, far from that. And I think that, I don't know how we, you know, I think if we just started handing out $50 bills, you know, I just don't think that would do what we would be setting out to do, and I'm not sure how we could do it in a way that then wouldn't, you know, if we said, okay, 2 teachers get to make 6 figures and everybody else doesn't get a cost of living adjustment, that seems like it could breed a lot of bad feelings and a lot of people who feel like their work isn't recognized and isn't valued because of, you know, so many factors that go into why numbers look like they look. So I think if we are going to ask the superintendent and administration to try to put together some ideas, that we need to be considering of it in all of those directions, and we need to give them real direction and think about what the end run is, right? So.
Already operating with deficit, and so the more that we try to give, the greater the deficit becomes.
I think that Ms. Halsey makes a good point, and I would say that one of the ways that we would definitely want to guide, if we evaluated this, we would need to have subjective criteria to qualify. And I think that's absolutely clear and transparent subjective criteria to qualify for any kind of a merit stipend. I disagree with Ms. Halsey in that I don't think teachers in San Marcos need to make 6 figures to feel like they're being recognized for merit. I think that there is something in the middle that we could do. And I'd like, I mean, I think that there are some really good points to be made here, and the impression I got from Dr. Cardona is that this is something that he would like to evaluate, and I agree with Mr. Shanks. We have hired a professional who makes a professional salary, and if this is something that he would like to recommend to us, I'm changed my mind. I'm open to hear it. But I would want it to be absolutely subjective criteria that are transparent and clear to everyone what those would be based on. And I'm not interested in the STAR test, just as an aside there. I don't know if that was
What was
clear.
that last part?
I'm not super interested in the STAR test being that criteria. That was just a little aside.
She had mentioned the maps. We
Yeah, no,
I'll clarify that I do think that there are districts that are specifically setting out to do 6 figures. Whether or not we need to do that, I wasn't saying. But I do think what we need to do needs to be significant. I think that otherwise teachers are super smart, and they will see an insignificant gesture as an insignificant gesture, however well intended it is. Right. And so I think we need to be meaningful in how we do that, and and be ready for
part of it
for all of what may happen.
Sure, and part of a transparent model is that it could proceed and keep going, right? So I don't think, I could be wrong, perhaps there are districts that are able to adjust salaries to 6 figures in the first time. I would imagine that this is an ongoing effort, and I would see us as perhaps being able to implement an ongoing effort to reward great performance by our teachers. And so I was not at all trying to say you were wrong. I was just saying I think for the average San Marcos ISD teacher that I know, it would not need to be 6 figures to make them feel like they were getting a merit raise. That was my statement.
You said they come up with a subjective format?
It needs to be an objective. I may have said subjective and I
said
misspoke.
subjective
Sorry,
and
an
I was like,
objective.
okay.
Yeah, an objective criteria. Sorry, I misspoke. Yeah. Yeah, the criteria need to be objective, and they need to be clear and transparent, and people need to know them.
Anyone else? If not, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. So moved. Ms. Diapondo made the motion. Do I?
I'll second it.
Mr. Shanks seconds it. All in favor, please raise your hand. 6, 0 opposed. Thank you.